the last 2 months what can be achieved when countries come together with conviction and focus. We saw it in Geneva, where the World Health Assembly adopted the pandemic agreement, a vital step toward a safer, more equitable global health architecture. We saw it in Nice, at the third UN Ocean Conference, where governments committed to expand marine protected areas and tackle plastic pollution and illegal fishing. And we saw it in Seville at the Fourth International Financing for Development Conference, where countries agreed on a new vision for global finance, one that expands fiscal space, lowers the cost of capital, and ensures developing countries have a stronger voice and participation in the organizations that shape their future. These are not isolated wins. They are signs of momentum, signs that multilateralism can deliver.
Good evening, Africa, and welcome to Talk of Africa 360, where truth is not filtered through foreign agendas, but spoken boldly from the heart of the continent. Tonight, we bring you a moment that has sent diplomatic shockwaves around the globe. For the first time in decades, a sitting Secretary General has broken ranks with traditional Western narratives, lending his voice in full support of Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim, and condemning the rising double standards in international diplomacy. In a fiery and unexpected address to the General Assembly, the UN chief not only acknowledged the legitimacy of Burkina Faso's new sovereign path, but went further, publicly criticizing the recent Western interventions and covert attacks on both Burkina Faso and Israel as violations of international law and human dignity. This is no ordinary press statement. This is a tectonic shift. Let us be clear. For the United Nations to openly challenge Western hegemony is rare, but for the institution's highest-ranking official to side with an African revolutionary government and critique the West's aggression in both Africa and the Middle East, that is nearly unprecedented. Let's break it down. In his address, the Secretary General highlighted the hypocrisy of selective outrage, where certain nations are sanctioned, destabilized, and isolated for defending their sovereignty, while others are praised, armed, and economically propped up, despite egregious violations of international norms. He cited Burkina Faso under President Ibrahim as a case study in misunderstood independence. He stated clearly, Burkina Faso is not a failed state, it is a sovereign one. It is choosing its path, a path rooted in dignity, in food security, in resource justice, and that path must be respected, not sabotaged. Those words struck like thunder in a chamber used to polite silence on African autonomy. He further condemned the economic warfare and psychological operations launched by Western intelligence against the transitional governments of the Sahel, campaigns aimed at isolating and toppling leaderships that dare to say no to neo-colonialism. But the statement didn't stop with Africa. In an equally striking turn, the UN chief lambasted the ongoing covert operations and economic aggression targeting Israel, raising eyebrows across global capitals. He made it clear that whether it is a Jewish homeland defending its existence or an African nation reclaiming its destiny, the sovereign right to self-defense and self-determination must never be selectively applied. That comment, controversial as it is, ignited fierce debate in diplomatic circles. Because here's what it exposed. The West's contradictions. Nations that champion freedom of speech, democracy, and human rights at home are the same ones destabilizing democratic transitions abroad when the leadership refuses to bow to their interests. They call it intervention. Africans call it what it is: economic colonialism in a modern suit. Let's not forget, Captain Ibrahim has committed no war crimes, no acts of genocide, no violations of humanitarian law. His greatest crime in the eyes of the West is refusing to sell uranium for pennies, rejecting IMF dependency, kicking out foreign military forces, and daring to feed his people with local food, not imported leftovers. That is the real threat, not to global peace, but to global profit, the UN chief continued. If the international community wishes to retain its moral credibility, it must defend sovereignty even when it is inconvenient. You cannot defend the sovereignty of Ukraine while undermining the sovereignty of Niger, of Palestine, of Burkina Faso. The law must apply equally, or it becomes the tool of the powerful. This is the speech African leaders have been waiting for, not because it saves us, but because it affirms what many of us have been saying for decades, that the African struggle for economic, political, and cultural liberation is not radical, it is righteous. Tonight, President Ibrahim stands taller, not just in the eyes of his people, but in the court of global public opinion. He has been maligned, demonized, and targeted, but now he has been recognized, and that recognition came not from Paris, Washington, or Brussels, but from the highest seat in the United Nations. Let this be a lesson to every African youth watching. Resistance is not rebellion, it is survival, it is honor, it is leadership to those who fear an Africa that feeds itself, arms itself, educates its children with its own values, and governs itself without puppet strings. We say this, that Africa is no longer in the future, it has begun. And to the UN chief for speaking truth in the halls of silence, Africa thanks you. This is Talk of Africa 360. The continent is awake and the world is watching.
Welcome to Talk of Africa 360, your source for insightful news, analysis, and thoughtful commentary. If you value informed perspectives and fact-based reporting, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is based on reliable public sources and credible online information. It is intended strictly for educational and analytical purposes. We do not promote or endorse political violence, hate speech, or any form of discrimination. Our goal is to inform, not to inflame. Thanks for being here. Let's stay informed together.
The last 2 months, what can be achieved when countries come together with conviction and focus. We saw it in Geneva, where the World Health Assembly adopted the pandemic agreement, a vital step toward a safer, more equitable global health architecture. We saw it in Nice, at the third UN Ocean Conference, where governments committed to expand marine protected areas and tackle plastic pollution and illegal fishing. And we saw it in Seville, at the Fourth International Financing for Development Conference, where countries agreed on a new vision for global finance, one that expands fiscal space, lowers the cost of capital, and ensures developing countries have a stronger voice and participation in the organizations that shape their future. These are not isolated wins. They are signs of momentum, signs that multilateralism can deliver, signs that transformation is not only necessary, it is possible. And that is the spirit we bring to this high-level political forum. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this forum is about renewing our common promise to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all. We also recognize the deep linkages between development and peace. We meet against the backdrop of global conflicts that are pushing the Sustainable Development Goals further out of reach. That is why we must keep working for peace in the Middle East. Over the weekend in Gaza, we saw yet more mass shootings and killings of people seeking UN aid for their families, an atrocious and inhumane act which I utterly condemn. We need an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate release of all hostages, and unimpeded humanitarian access as a first step to achieve the two-state solution. We need a ceasefire between Iran and Israel to hold. We need a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, based in the UN Charter, international law, and UN resolutions. We need an end to the horror and bloodshed in Sudan, and the list goes on, from the DRC to Somalia, from the Sahel to Myanmar. At every step, we know sustainable peace requires sustainable development. The Sustainable Development Goals are not a dream, they are a plan to keep our promises to the most vulnerable people, to each other, and to future generations. People win when we channel our energy into development. Since 2015, millions more people have access to electricity, clean cooking, and the internet. Social protection now reaches over half the world's population, up from just a quarter a decade ago. More girls are completing school. Child marriage is declining. Women's representation is growing, from the boardrooms of business to the halls of political power. But we must face a tough reality. Only 35% of SDG targets are on track or making moderate progress. Nearly half are moving too slowly, and 18% are going backwards. Meanwhile, the global economy is slowing, trade tensions are rising, inequalities are growing, aid budgets are being decimated while military spending soars, and mistrust, division, and outright conflicts are placing international problem-solving system under unprecedented strain. We cannot sugarcoat those facts, but we must not surrender to them either. The SDGs still are within reach if we act with urgency and ambition. This year's forum focuses on 5 critical goals: health, gender equality, decent work, life below water, and global partnerships. All are essential, all are interconnected, all can spur change across other goals. On health, COVID-19 exposed and deepened inequalities, and today far too many people still lack access to basic care. We know what works. We must boost investment in universal health coverage, rooted in strong primary care and prevention, reaching those furthest behind first. On gender equality, gaps remain wide. Women and girls face systemic barriers, from violence and discrimination to unpaid care and limited political voice. But we also see growing momentum, from grassroots movements to national reforms. Now is the time to turn that momentum into transformation, with rights-based policies, accountability, and real financing into programs that support inclusion and equality for women and girls. On decent work, the global economy is leaving billions behind. Over 2 billion people are in informal jobs, and youth unemployment is stubbornly high. But we have tools to change these. The Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection is helping countries invest in expanded social protection initiatives, skills training, and the creation of sustainable livelihoods, including in growing industries like clean energy. Tomorrow, I will deliver an address on the enormous opportunities of the renewables revolution. And the upcoming World Summit on Social Development can help spur further progress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on life below water, our ocean and the communities that count on it are paying the price of overfishing, pollution, and climate change. We must deliver on the commitments of the Nice Ocean Conference to protect marine ecosystems and support the millions who depend on them. And finally, on global partnerships, SG17, we need to strengthen all the elements that can support progress. And this means investing in science, data, and local capacity, and harnessing digital innovation, including artificial intelligence, to accelerate progress, not deepen divides. Throughout, we must recognize the need to reform the unfair global financial system, which no longer represents today's world or the challenges faced by developing countries. We must ensure a reform for developing countries to have a stronger voice and greater participation to help advance the Sustainable Development Goals on the ground. The Seville commitment that emerged from the Conference on Financing for Development includes important steps. Through new domestic and global commitments that can channel public and private finance to the areas of greatest need. By increasing the capacity of governments to substantially mobilize domestic resources, including through tax reform. And by establishing a more effective framework for debt relief and tripling the lending capacity of multilateral development banks to the benefit of developing countries. Excellences, Au cours de l'année à venir, nous devons continuer à construire.
As reactions continue to pour in from across the continent, one thing is clear. Africa is demanding respect, sovereignty, and accountability. Was this just a diplomatic misstep or a deeper sign of shifting global alliances? We'll be watching closely. If you found this story important, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, unfiltered African news. This is Talk of Africa 360, telling the stories that matter.